few weeks ago, I made a video about professional saxophones. What separates a pro sax from a beginner sax? If a great player can make a beginner sax sound like a pro sax, what's the point of spending all that extra money? And I'm so glad I did make that video, because with me here is an instrument that threatens to blow up every notion we have about professional saxophones. Are you ready? This is the Jean Paul TS-860. Before you hear my review, a quick note, Jean Paul provided me this saxophone for the purposes of this review. However, like always, this is an entirely independent review. There are no prearranged talking points, and all of the views expressed here are my own. If you do like the look and sound of this saxophone, you can use my affiliate link in the description below to purchase this sax for yourself. Doing so helps support the SaxTuition channel and doesn't cost you an extra cent. Well, let's get into it. Now, I'm a sucker for a horn with personality, and at first glance, this horn has it in spades. I'm in love with the engraving on the bell, the Miami Beach scene paying tribute to the company's workshop and headquarters. In addition to the beach engraving, you'll also find the traditional floral patterns on the bell, on the body, on the neck. Really, it's just all over, giving the horn quite an ornate feel. The gold lacquer, which comes standard on this saxophone, presents well. But if I'm being really honest, I'd love to see the unlacquered version advertised on their website. Come on, Jean Paul, show us the pics of it. Of course, the next thing demanding your attention are those keys. Although referred to as black pearl, these keys aren't in fact black pearl. Instead, they're a blackish, purplish, sparkly plastic. Now, some people will love these keys, others won't. As for me, I feel conflicted. I genuinely love the look of them. I love how they make this saxophone pop without being completely overbearing. But I don't exactly love the feel of them. Real mother of pearl keys give you a nice tactile feeling. They're smooth without being slippery, giving you just a hint of grip, which is useful if the keys ever get moisture on them, which of course they often do. Now, I know these keys make a statement, but I think a bigger statement would be real mother of pearl, or perhaps abalone shell like we get on some of the P. Moriat horns. Having a semi-precious material like that lets the player know this saxophone is here to stay. It's worth holding on to, and it's just plain worth it. The only other drawback I can find with the horn's presentation is some solder marks around the posts and ribbing of the saxophone. And I have to say, right now, it's pretty common on Chinese horns to see these sorts of marks. But of course, being a pro horn, we'd prefer not to see them. However, these marks won't affect the tone, and to be honest, you won't really notice them at all unless you're right up close. Which brings me to the next point. The construction. Like most pro saxophones, and even a growing amount of student saxophones, this horn uses ribbed construction, which reinforces the posts with plates known as ribs. This results in a heavier horn than those that use post-to-body construction, and many would argue, as I pointed out in my last video, it also results in a slightly darker tone. Having said that, this is not a heavy sax by any means, clocking in at 3.4 kilograms without a mouthpiece. For reference, my 1958 Selmer Mark VI, which is considered light for a tenor, clocks in only 200 grams lighter at 3.2 kilograms. Now, I've got to say, I'm not a fan of heavy saxophones, so it is a relief that this one's on the lighter side. Everything about this sax feels solid. There's minimal play in the keys, and simple touches like the tri-point bell brace, metal thumb rest and hook, and reinforced neck receiver all tick the essential boxes for a pro horn. The only other point worth mentioning really is the neck screw, or should I say the heavy mass screw. Now, when it comes to heavy mass screws and their potential for improving your tone, I'm a skeptic. However, what I do know is that this screw feels really nice to adjust. Please, don't go basing your purchasing decision on whether a saxophone screw feels good to adjust. But hey, I'm just telling you, it does feel good. Now, before we take this horn for a spin, there's one more important note to consider about how Jean Paul manufactures their saxophones. As I've covered in previous videos, their process is quite unique. They manufacture all of their saxophones in China, something that they're very transparent with in their company's messaging. But instead of shipping these horns directly to the consumer, all of these instruments get sent to their workshop in Miami to get professionally set up and checked over before being sent out. This extra step in the manufacturing process is vital for maintaining quality control. And of course, if something does go wrong from a customer's point of view, you're dealing with their US-based office rather than directly with a factory in China. So then the time has come to put this saxophone to the test. How does it play? And how does it compare to one of the most revered saxophones of all time? A 5-digit 1958 Selmer Mark VI. Look, this is not exactly a fair comparison, but anyone who's used to the SaxTuition channel knows I'm a big fan of unfair comparisons. So let's put them in a blind test. Comment your favorite sax below, either A or B, and I'll reveal the results right after the playtest. So which one was your favorite, A or B? I'll reveal these saxophones in just a second, but first let me share with you my thoughts about the TS-860. Firstly, I loved the tone of this instrument. I found it played dark with a lot of authority. It actually has a lot more projection than my Mark VI, which doesn't always translate on the microphone, but trust me, it would be heard in a live setting. I also found it had quite a spread sound compared to the focus of the Selmer. The intonation of this horn was all within normal tolerances, but I think it's really important to mention that no saxophone has, quote, perfect intonation. Every sax I've ever played has little quirks to the tuning, and it's your job as a player to learn these quirks and compensate where you can. What we do look out for, though, is big issues with intonation. We don't want massive sharp or flat spots on the horn. Everything needs to be completely manageable for us, which I'm happy to say for this horn, it is. I'll also point out that the mouthpiece I used on this playtest was the recently released Jody Jazz hand-hammered mouthpiece with an 8-star opening. I know many of you will probably have questions about this mouthpiece, so stay tuned because I promise I will release my thoughts about it in a later video. For now though, you're probably dying for me to reveal the results of the playtest, so here it is. A was the Mark VI and B was the TS-860. Did this surprise you in any way, or were the results what you're expecting? Make sure to share your thoughts in the comments down below. Now for me personally, there's an element of any saxophone that's just as important as tone, or perhaps even more so, and that's ergonomics. How a saxophone feels under my fingers directly affects how creative I can be in my improvising, how I manage difficult phrases, and whether I can forget my instrument is even there. Now I'm pleased to say overall the TS-860 feels good, although there are a few adjustments I would make for it to feel truly amazing. The first is simply lowering the key height, particularly in the right hand. Personally, I like the action of my saxes to be low and light. For reference, the key opening on my Mark VI on my F key is approximately 7mm. On the Jean Paul, it's around 1 centimeter. It might not seem like much, but a 3mm difference can have a big impact once it's in your hands. Put it this way, going from my Mark VI to this horn, I'm pressing each key a further 42% of the distance I'm used to in order to get a seal. Because my fingers are working harder, that can affect the flow of my phrasing. What I can say though is that this is a personal preference. Not everyone will want the same feeling that I do. It's also something that can be easily fixed by taking the horn to a local technician. The other thing I'm not crazy about is the shape of the thumb hook. Specifically, how much it hooks. Let's compare it to my Mark VI and a Yamaha YTS-23. Notice how much the hook on the Jean Paul hooks around. That sharper angle can end up digging into your thumb a little bit and restricts the movement in your right hand, which subtly prevented me from getting into a really comfortable playing position. Because I've got large hands, it's quite noticeable, but it's very possible that if your hands are smaller than mine, you might not notice it at all. Thankfully though, that's also an easy fix. I could pick up a new thumb hook online for less than $10 and replace it without having to visit a technician. Now it has to be said, everything else about this saxophone feels pretty great. The keywork is right where I want it, and after playing my Mark VI for so long, it's a relief to be able to precisely press my left-hand palm keys without the use of key risers or brushing another palm key by accident. These keys are as good as I've felt on any pro horn. The pinky keys on both hands feel good and feature subtle curves to keep those fingers right where you want them. The only other points to note is that the B and C sharp keys are missing the linkage that was on the SS-860, which is the soprano version of this horn, and the high F key is circular, like on my Mark VI, and not the teardrop shape that's common on other modern horns. So whilst all the fundamentals are there from the get-go, a couple of small adjustments to this horn and you could have a formidable instrument in your hands. Now I've got to finish this video by talking about the brand. In my opinion, a professional sax offers the clearest picture of a brand's identity. It's clear to me this saxophone isn't made to compete with the most elite tier of pro saxophones. Instead, the TS-860 is a challenger to the entry-level pro category, going up against the likes of the YTS-62 from Yamaha and the TW-01 from Yanagisawa. So what's Jean Paul really bringing to the table with this saxophone? Well, it's the same as what they're bringing with all of their saxophones: value. Taking into account US prices, the TS-860 is $1,500 clear of the YTS-62, as well as similar offerings from the likes of Yanagisawa, P. Moriarty, and Eastman. Now the picture changes slightly when you look at global prices. So if you're not in the US, I do recommend you do your own comparisons once you factor in things like shipping, tax, and exchange rates. But at least for US customers, the price saving is clear. So what will $2,200 buy you from other major brands? Turns out, not much. According to Sweetwater, in that approximate range, you'll get a couple of student models from Selmer USA and a student model from Eastman. Not bad saxophones by any stretch, but also nothing that could really be considered pro level. Now, in my previous video where I looked at the differences between beginner and pro saxophones, I made the point that there's differing opinions about the value of a pro instrument. Most pros swear by them, and the enthusiast inside them loves buying into an established heritage brand. Others, well, they simply don't see the value. With the TS-860, perhaps Jean Paul are appealing to a third group: the value-conscious sax player. Someone who wants to dive into the pro waters without the pro price tag. If you can forgive a few minor imperfections, aren't opposed to the sparkly keys, and possibly have $5 spare to spend on a replacement thumb hook, this saxophone is a real winner. So for those lucky enough to own one, don't go throwing out your Mark VI anytime soon. But if you're serious about your saxophone playing, You want an instrument that reflects that passion, and you've got an eye for value. The TS-860 could just be the saxophone for you. Well guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this saxophone. Do you own one? Do you want to buy one? Leave your comments and questions down below. And remember, if you want to pick up this TS-860 for yourself, make sure to use my link in the description of this video. It's a great way to support the channel and it won't cost you an extra cent. Special thanks to Tim and the team at Jean Paul for sending this horn halfway across the globe to me. It is so appreciated. Well, thanks for watching guys, and of course, I'll see you all again soon.